Good morning. We're going to get started. I want to welcome you to our HBCU Entrepreneurial Ecosystem Initiative. Everyone should have a copy of the Entrepreneurial Ecosystem. That's what we're going to be talking about all day today. If you didn't get a copy, they're down here. Our panel is going to be discussing the entrepreneurial ecosystem. As you can see, it's about markets, it's about human capital, it's about finance, it's about culture, it's about supports. And so we're going to be discussing what does it take to create this entrepreneurial ecosystem. And we have a distinguished panel that's going to be discussing that topic. So I want you to ask them questions about the entrepreneurial ecosystem and what we need to do here in the Louisiana and Baton Rouge community to move that ecosystem forward. On the back of that sheet, we hear a lot of discussion today about entrepreneurship. Well, what exactly is entrepreneurship? You can see more or less it's about opportunity. It's creating opportunity. It's about finding resources. So you can ask these panelists questions about resources. Are resources available in this entrepreneurial ecosystem? And we all know in terms of small businesses, they start out with an opportunity, and everyone aspires to that opportunity to grow within this ecosystem. And so that takes teamwork. So how do you develop the team? And in all cases, you need a plan. So if you start out more or less on a road, with a map, you can find out where you want to go and how you get there. Without a plan, you may end up anywhere. And that's what we don't want you to do. We want you to end up reaching your goal for success. So that takes leadership, it takes creativity, and it takes communications. And so that's what the panelists are going to be discussing. So that's their assignment for today. This is sponsored by the Delta Regional Authority. And we have Ms. Richardson here from the Delta, from the DRA. Raise your hand, Ms. Richardson. And also we have one of the consultants, Vaughn Nkosi. Vaughn is at the back. He's doing some videoing for this session as well. This is all about students. That is, we want to make sure our students are plugged into the ecosystem. In that, when we talk about universities, there are three things that universities do well, and that is create talent. So we're about teaching and instruction to create talent. That's why we want our students engaged today in this program. Universities are also about research. That is, in terms of creativity, new ideas. Where are the new companies coming from today? They're coming out of the research labs, out of the STEM industries. We hear people talking about STEM. Well, I sort of changed that around a little bit. I call it B-STEM. You need to have business. Because if you're going to have technology, engineering, and new industries being developed, you need someone who is entrepreneurial to make that happen, who can implement this ecosystem. When we look out in Silicon Valley, the reason they're so successful is because they have world-class research universities. They have Stanford, they have Berkeley, and they have others within that ecosystem. They have the venture capitalists within that ecosystem. They have the legal framework within that ecosystem. So they have more or less developed a world-class ecosystem to generate the kind of results that they want to see in terms of economic development. And our president is going to come up in just a few minutes and say some things about economic development and the role he sees for Southern University. So universities basically do teaching, they do research, and also service to the community. We outreach to the community to bring the community up. That's what land-grant university's mission is all about. And so I'm just happy that you all are here more or less to hear from our distinguished panel this morning. And so at this point, I'm going to bring up President Belton, who comes to us from a distinguished career, and he has basically indicated that he wants Southern University at the forefront in terms of entrepreneurship, small business development, and economic development. President Belton.
Thank you, Dean, and good morning to everyone. I'd like to bring greetings on behalf of the Southern University system and to welcome you to this conference that purports to bring a focus on establishing a entrepreneurship ecosystem. I'd like to kind of preface my comments by first acknowledging Dean Andrews and the faculty of the College of Business. I have admired his work from afar for a number of years, and certainly since I've been down to Baton Rouge, it is clear and evident that they are advancing the goals of Southern University. Under his leadership, thousands of students have graduated from the College of Business, and their work on the job is literally defining Southern University as I speak. You know, it's interesting, you know, that there was a point in time, certainly in my life, that there was no thought about owning your own business. We grew up with the anticipation of working for someone. Absolutely no consideration of it. And so today, we are really, in my perspective, shaping opportunities, developing talent, if you will, that would allow for our students, for our stakeholders and constituents to really gain a better appreciation of entrepreneurship and the value that comes with not only owning your businesses, but providing opportunities to employ other individuals. And so, again, I'm really pleased that his work joined me in acknowledging Dean Andrews for his stellar contributions. I'm also genuinely pleased to note that we have a panelist this morning who are experts in their own right, who have a long-standing history of being committed to our communities, and who have the right mix, and I think who would afford us an opportunity to glean from their wisdom in terms of next steps that may well enable us to fulfill our goals in establishing such an ecosystem. I think for Southern University, where we do have a pipeline for talent development, our next step is really working with stakeholders, engaging in collaborations that will help us advance our responsibility, our obligation to shape entrepreneur and economic development beyond the boundaries of the Baton Rouge campus. And I preface that by again saying that it is my belief that that is an obligation. I frequently speak to an encounter I had with my son, who was a student at Southern University and who would frequently attend football games, whether they be at home or away. And on one such occasion, he came back. He was coming from an away game, and he came back and he asked me a pointed question about to what degree or why is it that HBCUs in particular are in depressed communities. And And my initial reaction was one to cite, the board versus the board of Brown versus the Board of Education, and maybe speak about vestiges of segregation and the like. But then I stopped and thought about the question more pointedly and realized that, these type of institutions, HBCUs in particular, in my mind, are in the right place. They are in and of themselves economic drivers, or should be. And they then have a responsibility to position themselves to ensure that communities are revitalized, position themselves such they could be leaders in driving economic development opportunities in their respective communities, and therein bringing about opportunities for stakeholders and bringing about the wherewithal where each and every one of us could realize a heightened quality of life. And so today, and particularly now, I think the climate is ripe for engagement, particularly in North Baton Rouge. And the time is necessary for Southern University to step up and step up in a manner that brings agencies together to invite agencies to take advantage of our infrastructure, to maybe even serve as a convener, if you will, and collaborate with newly found agencies and long-standing establishments like our chambers and foundations to make a difference for Baton Rouge generally and North Baton Rouge specifically. It is time for us to be engaged, and again, not for the sake of just being entrepreneurs in our own right, but because it's our responsibility. It's because it's our mission, and it's because of our role to be a participant in advancing these type of opportunities. So I am fully committed to it. In the next few weeks, we are going to ask the Board of Supervisors, and I feel compelled to acknowledge one member of our board who's going to serve as a panelist, Raymond Fondell, who's with us. In the next couple of weeks, I'm going to ask Mr. Fondell and others to embrace an appointment that we are poised to make, where we will provide for an individual to represent the interests of Southern as they represent, in fact, our goal of advancing entrepreneurship in our community. And we would anticipate that individual will engage with stakeholders throughout the community as to make that a reality for us. But I think you will see more and more the degree to which Southern is fully represented and fully taking or assuming responsibility for changing the climate in our community of investing where we can, but certainly assuming our obligation to fulfill those aims. And so I'm kind of looking forward to today, hearing our panel, and really want to thank the Dean Andrews and the faculty for what they've done, but for more importantly, facilitating this conference where we could glean from those who know best.
Thank you, Mr. President. Next, we have Vice President and Provost of Southern University, Dr. Christopher Brown.
Morning. It's good to be here. First, I want to ditto everything my boss said in the interest of time and say, if you were not at the reception last night, for example, to hear Board Member Clayton talk about what happened here on the campus of Southern University and how he developed the skill and passion for entrepreneurship was particularly exciting. Certainly, we thank all of the panelists. We thank Dean Andrews for pulling this together. On behalf of the Academic Council and the Council of Deans, we gave full support to this initiative. One of the things that we have been saying, and we said it at the MBA commencement, was that certainly for our community, small business, micro business, and mid-sized businesses will be critical to creating jobs and opportunities in our communities. Even though many of us may want to go move off to Houston, Atlanta, Vegas, as Drake would say, there's still work that needs to be provided in small towns like Bunkie and New Roads, Opelousas, and Amite. And so we would hope that the graduates of Southern would be a part of making that happen. It's an exciting panel, an exciting day. I will be in and out throughout the day. They got me double and triple booked, so I'm glad to be here this morning. Hope to catch part of this first session and be back midday and for the close. But please take all you can, learn all you can. It will definitely benefit you going forward. And when you get rich, don't forget about Southern. Even though we may have been late with your deferment or your refund check, give back so that other students won't have that problem going forward. Thank you so much, Dean Andrews.
Thank you, Dr. Brown. And as we know, academics is the critical issue in terms of talent development. And I want to welcome our students, and I want to indicate it was my mistake to start this program at 9 when we should have started at 9:30 when the students are here. So basically, you students here, this program is about you becoming entrepreneur. And therefore, we want you to listen at this panel. We want you to ask them questions. We want you to ask them hard questions. We don't want you to ask them easy questions because these guys are experts. They know the answers. They know how to put an ecosystem together. And they know what it takes to make that happen. And so you see on the screen here, you see change. So we know change is taking place today. And I just kind of want to frame their discussion, and we're going to bring them up. But just to frame their discussion, change in the new economy. So this is the U.S. economy over the last 200 years. We've gone from an agricultural society to an industrial society to now a post-industrial society. Most people today don't know anything about farming. 75% to 80% of the workers are in service. We see more or less manufacturing or industry has declined, and there's been a lot of discussion of that. But this gentleman here, anybody knows who this is? Who's my students? Who is that person right there? Sonny. And what does Sonny do? He's a robot. What does he do, though? What does it say at the top? Brilliant machines. Deep Blue, Watson, can I help you think? So these robots are now being able to simulate human thinking. We have manufacturing taking place in what we refer to as lights out facilities. Don't need any lighting because you've got robots. They don't need any light. They don't come late. They don't complain. They don't ask for high wages. So this is reality. So you've got to be able to outthink robots. This is the challenge. Who's winning in this race? We see there what? Less than high school. They had $100 in 1973. They've got what? 82 cents now. We see those with high school. They had $100 in 1973. They got about $99 a day. Those that are winning in the economic race are those with what? College and advanced degrees. So basically, you need to take your educational opportunities seriously and put the time in. This is unemployment rate. If you look, say, at unemployment rate by education for African Americans, we talk about the unemployment rate for African Americans being double that of the national rate. But we see basically for those with what? Bachelor's degrees, it is less than what? 5%. Those with what? Less than a high school diploma, it's almost 20%. So education does pay in terms of reducing the level of unemployment as well as increasing the level of compensation. We also hear about income inequality. We see today that the top 10% earn 50% of the income. We have more inequality. We haven't had these level of inequality since the 1920s. People complain about the New Deal, but the New Deal had programs that brought about more equality within the economy. Investment in human capital. What are some of the impediments? Poverty, where one lives, access to quality schools. William Winter, former governor of Mississippi, said the only road that runs out of poverty does what? Runs through the schoolhouse door. So your schooling and education is critical in terms of your advancement in society. Preparing for the future is going to be volatile, uncertain, complex, and filled with ambiguity. Some people today are getting uncomfortable. But you have to be willing to what? Change. You have to have vision, understanding, clarity, and agility. That's what education does for you. Business of the future, entrepreneurial, information technology, global, and you have to understand problem solving as well as managing dilemmas. Some things don't have a solution. You have to make trade-offs. You have to manage them. So new business have to be global, IT, biotechnology revolution, business redesign, outsourcing, offshoring, increase in strategic alliances, e-commerce, supply chain management, restructured government procurement, and changing market demographics. New realities in business, you have to leverage new markets, develop new capital structure, develop new business structure, leverage government resources. University linkages are highly important. Encourage use of technology, use of business incubators. New realities in business world today have caused a revolution in thinking with respect to developing entrepreneurship programs in terms of the academic programs. The entrepreneurial process, create a better way, create a better world, be innovative, and improve humankind in spirit. The entrepreneurial process, you should have this, it was passed out to you. You have to recognize opportunity, find the resources, create the team, connect the dots, have a business plan, leadership, creativity, and communication. These are some of the things we do in the university. We have academic programs, entrepreneurship courses, concentrations, research, grants, small business and consulting, value added in the supply chain, SBIR, STTR, various alliances, collaborations, outreach, small business development, business incubation, research park, community development corporations. Never doubt that a small group of committed people can change the world. Leader is the only thing it ever has. So we have to be committed. And here we see more or less people going in the Atlas rocket to the moon. Kennedy achieving what he said he was going to do. Okay, so you have to complete. You have to do what? Graduate. Don't come here not to graduate, but come here and graduate. It may take you 8 years, but graduate. So questions. We're going to leave the questions for the panel. Okay, we're going to start the panel discussion off, giving each panelist 5 minutes, and then we're going to open it up for questions. And I want you to have some hard questions. We also have the Dean of the Southern University College of Business at New Orleans. Let's give him a round of applause. Dr. Uday, raise your hand. We also have Darren Dixon from Shreveport. He brought his students here are going to compete in the business plan competition. Students, raise your hand. Okay, so this is all about putting together a business plan, and we're going to have our business pitch competition on tomorrow at 3 o'clock. Okay, so Senator Barrow.
Good morning, everyone. Oh, come on. Good morning, everybody. I know it's still early, but I am so happy to see each of you, and I'm going to stand because I want to make sure that I can see everybody's hand in the audience. How many of you have a plan to start a business or would like to have your own business one day? Southern Women Clothing. Okay, that's interesting.
Man's Collection.
Okay, so you've already started.
Yeah. Yeah. I have everything planned. I set goals. When I was in junior high, I would sell clothes, but it was only to help my mom pay bills. And I didn't know at the time that I was young that I had to get everything registered. So now that I'm older and I educated myself more about it, I just went ahead and went with it.
Awesome. Let's give Danielle a hand of applause. Oh, that is awesome, Danielle. Let me get someone from this side, please, to tell me your name and the business that you're interested in. Awesome. Let's give her a hand of applause. I want you to know that you are a part of history. To my knowledge, and if I'm incorrect, Dean, you let me know, I have never known a workshop of this magnitude put together at the university with all of the people you see here. You have a representative here from the Chamber of Commerce. You have representation here from the school. You have the tech park here. You have a wealth of knowledge here from the state who have been working with small businesses for over 20 years, if not longer. And then you have myself along with another one of my great friends and colleagues who have actually started legislation or passed legislation that actually kind of gets the North Baton Rouge economic development spurred and growing. This has never happened, to my knowledge. Am I correct?
We've been working at it.
Yeah, but with all of these players at the same time. Yeah, this is the first. So this, to me, is like the perfect storm that has been brewing. The dean is correct. For many years, the university, as well as many other people from the community, have been working on initiatives to get North Baton Rouge growth spurred here, to get things going in North Baton Rouge. But now I believe that the perfect storm has brewed and brought all of the different pieces together, because what we are witnessing now is something we've never seen before. What we have known as business in the past will no longer be business in the future. And I believe that the slides that we saw earlier really speaks to that. Technology is definitely going to be the key. Things I never thought that I would have witnessed in my lifetime, which I am not that old, but I've seen a lot of things change from the time that I was old enough to understand certain things to where we are now. I mean, when I look at just music alone, when I first started out, when I was born, they had albums. Anybody know what an album is? And then they went to, was it cassettes? It was cassette. Was it cassettes? It was no 8-tracks. That's right.
Yeah.
8 tracks. Help me out.
Yeah, showing your age.
Yeah. So just gonna show you 8 tracks. Anybody know what an 8-track is? Anybody ever seen one of those? A few hands. And they're not the younger group. Then cassettes. Oh, really? Okay. Then we went to cassettes. Anybody know what a cassette is? Okay. Then CDs, right? And then now we have, I just have my phones I just hook up now. I don't even know some of the other things that they have. But just within, I would say less than 50 years, that one spectrum has changed more than 4 times. So what we have been accustomed to will no longer be what it has been. And so my role as a legislator, when I looked at the ecosystem, I fit in the area of policy. And that's one of the things I've done. Back in 2005 is when I was first elected in a special election right before Hurricane Katrina. My daughter was still in high school at the time, getting ready to graduate from Glen Oaks High School. And one day she said to me, as soon as I graduate and I get me a decent job, I'm moving from North Baton Rouge. And I was like, well, why are you moving? She said, there's nothing to do over here. There's nowhere to go. She said, look how it looks outside. It was raining that particular day. She said, it looks so dismal. Everything just looks dead. She said, and I'm going to move. She said, I'm going to move either to the other side of town or I'm going to move away from Baton Rouge. And when she said that to me, I was like, we need to change that. We cannot have our young people thinking that there's nothing in North Baton Rouge, or North Baton Rouge has nothing to offer. And so that became part of my goal. So in 2007, after I was reelected, I started working on a piece of legislation that was really kind of drawn along the lines of my district, which is mostly North Baton Rouge. And it was called the Greenwell Springs Airline Economic Development District. And it became Act 98. We put it into place, didn't have any funding for it, but we had a board that began to do small projects. They work with small businesses to help them with a business plan, to help kind of get the business going. We kind of struggled along for a long time. As a matter of fact, we have struggled along until now. In 2015, I changed the name of the board so that it really reflect North Baton Rouge, and it became Baton Rouge North Economic Development District, changed the boundary lines, and changed the board makeup. Last year, we were very fortunate to pass a piece of legislation that would allow us to be able to create a funding stream so that we can really begin to put this piece of legislation to work, because it's really been struggling without any money. Say money. No, y'all, I know y'all know about money. It takes money to get things done. How many of y'all believe it takes money? Yeah, it takes money. So we struggled along. And so last year, well, in 2016, we passed the legislation. We got it passed, which was a job within itself to get that legislation passed, but we got it passed. And then in December of last year, the voters went and they voted in favor of this occupancy tax, which will allow businesses within the boundary lines, or I'm sorry, hotels and motels within the boundary line to be charged an extra 2% that would come back to the district. And so now we have a funding stream so that we could begin to do great work in North Baton Rouge. And Mr. Rinaldi Jacobs, who is the executive director of Baton Rouge North Economic Development District, will speak a little bit more about that and some of the work. But my role has been the policy part. So now we put some infrastructure in place with some money attached to begin to work in helping businesses, existing businesses as well as new businesses, to come and grow in North Baton Rouge. And I'm really excited about that. I'm excited about all the young people who raised their hand, who have business ideas, who are already, many of you have already started with your businesses. And I really want to wish you much success. As we continue to go down this road, there may be other policy changes that we will make, different incentives that we may be able to provide that are not in place, not in existence now. But there are a lot of incentives already in place. And I know Mr. Matthews will talk a lot about those incentives and a lot about what already exists that you can use and tap into. But if it doesn't exist and we need it to exist, then that becomes my role as a policymaker. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is John Matthews, and I'm the Director of Small Business Services for Louisiana Economic Development. First, let me say to President Belton that we definitely applaud the move to hire an individual to coordinate and to help with moving entrepreneurship and economic development forward. We think, at the state level that Southern University, when we talk about North Baton Rouge, Southern University is that anchor. We know that in order for us to have a healthy North Baton Rouge, it starts with the assets that are here at Southern University. So I definitely applaud that. But I also want to say before we get into ecosystems and entrepreneurship that there's also a challenge, Dr. Belton, and that challenge is that we need to make sure that within the Southern University system, I think that Dean Andrews put up a number of efforts and initiatives related to entrepreneurship, and we need to make sure that they come together and that they are moving with one voice and that they're moving with one step. And I think that that will help us go a long way in terms of providing positive outcomes, providing success stories when we make sure that that we truly develop an ecosystem within the Southern University system, and hopefully that would be one of the charges of this individual. So we applaud you at that. Now, when we talk about the ecosystem, it's a living organism. You know, ecosystem is really that environment that helps that entrepreneur gain success. And when we look at our small business community, there are many individuals that are in business that don't know how to run businesses. There are many individuals that start businesses that are not aware of the playing field. How can you be successful if you don't know the game? How can you be successful if you don't understand what are the issues and what does that playing field look like? So I think that for our folk out here that want to go into business and that have just started a business, first understand what the game looks like. And that involves, you know, when we look at, I look at four things, four simple boxes. One is capability. You have to have the capability to run a construction company in terms of nailing the nail and pouring concrete and doing whatever it is. You have to have the capability to buy those clothes and to sew and to for those that are in bakery, they need to have the understanding and the capability of how to bake bread. That's the part that's on you. But that next box, that second box is the box where many of our folks fail. And that box is on capacity. You know, many of our small business owners do not have the capacity to compete, period. Yes, we have the talent. Yes, we have the understanding of how to work. Yes, we have the skill sets. Yes, we have the law degree. Yes, we have the marketing degree. Yes, we have all these different skill sets, but we don't have an understanding of how to run a business. We don't have that capacity. So that's where a number of these resources come into play. How can you compete as a first-generation entrepreneur against fourth-generation competition? You need assistance. Many of our folk don't even know where to go to get that assistance, and something even as simple as a contractor's license. You're not going to compete in the construction industry if you don't have a contractor's license. You're not going to compete in the construction industry if you don't know how to estimate. You're not going to compete in the construction industry if you don't have bonding. You're not going to compete in the construction industry if you don't have the ability to mobilize and have the ability to go ahead and find lines of credit. So that's what ecosystems are really about. Ecosystems, in my opinion, are about providing the right resource at the right time to our constituents. How do we make sure that individuals that are in the early stages get the nourishment that they need to get to the next level? How do we make sure that individuals at the early stages get to a point where they can sustain and grow their businesses? So that's the box. You got capability, then you have capacity. Capacity is that box that's just so hard because many of our folks don't even know how to get to the help that you need, and that's where my office can help. And I'm not going to get into LED. We have a website. We'll talk about that later. But then that third box, remember there are four boxes. That third box has to do with opportunity. You know, you can't have opportunity. Look, this is real. Business is something that you have to figure out how to get someone to buy your goods and services over somebody else. So you have to understand opportunity and what it looks like. You have to understand what you need to do to be able to make that happen. And so we have programs to help you with that. There are many, many resources out there to help you with that. My message this morning is just simply do your homework. Do the research, understand what the playing field looks like, get the help, use it everywhere you can. Right next to me, we have at the Technology Park, we have a program called Nexus. There are many programs at LED, and I may touch on a few of them, but for the most part, let me say that those resources are there. There's even opportunity for you to do business with the state with some of the programs that we have. And that last box is pretty interesting because that last box is about sustainability. And that's where we want to make sure that our businesses grow, because if we could get them to sustain, they will hire. If we could get them to sustain, they will bring wealth. Oh, and by the way, when you talk about economic development in North Baton Rouge or anywhere else, you have to talk about, and young folks, I want y'all to understand this, you have to talk about exporting your goods and services and importing value. If it's North Baton Rouge, if it's Baton Rouge, if it's Louisiana, no matter what it is, you need to talk about how do we export our goods and services and how do we import in dollars. In other words, how do we bring more dollars into our community? We don't want to just move a dollar from one corner to another corner because that's not net economic development. We have to figure out how do we go get them dollars, bring them to our community, and keep them in our community so that they can flip and turn over several times. So when we look at this thing called sustainability, I often say to people, if you do business today like you did yesterday, you'll be out of business tomorrow. And that's why this ecosystem is a living organism. That's why this ecosystem has to be built so that it can move with the times. It can move with whatever the issues are, that it is a living organism that is not static. It's a living organism that has to continuously be tweaked. It's a living organism that basically has the responsibility of ensuring and making sure that the individuals have a fair shot and a fair chance at growing and sustaining their businesses. Oh, and by the way, it is not a guarantee. I see many, many individuals that think that, well, I'll just print me some business cards, call myself a business, and then I can go play video games or go to the mall all day. Well, you know, there are no guarantees. It's all about, when we talk to people that are successful in the small business community, I often hear the fact that they have the passion for whatever it is that they're doing. Find something that you have a passion for, and then move around that passion, and then go out there and make sure you do the research in terms of what that playing field is about, which is called the business plan, among others. Then make sure you reach out to the resources that are there to help you with the skill sets that you need to work on that capacity. Then make sure that, you know, and this is the last thing that I'm gonna say before I pass the mic. I want the folks in here to understand that when we talk about an ecosystem, look at it like an emergency room. That's the best way I can explain it. It's an emergency room. And the small business owner is in need of care at the emergency room. Typically, we need to make sure that there's a triage approach so that when that small business owner hits that emergency room, somebody can determine what is that basic need to keep that patient alive. Is it a brain surgeon? Is it a heart doctor? Is it a bone specialist? But we need to make sure we have those specialists at the emergency room. And that's the point that many of us don't get, is that we have to look at entrepreneurship and this thing called ecosystems as a triage. And I'll be here and certainly to answer questions, but I ask that you go to OpportunityLouisiana.com. Opportunity spelled out, Louisiana.com. And that will give you a wealth of information about how to grow, how to sustain, how to start a business, and incentives that are there if you really want to. Thank you.
something just occurred to me. So 40 years ago, I was you. I was an engineering student at Tuskegee University, and it's pretty much exactly 40 years ago. So I was thinking about what can I say to you today that I wish I would have heard 40 years ago. So I'm going to start with a couple things. First of all, you're going to hear about a lot of tools today, about the ecosystem, a lot of tools. But understand that these are just tools, okay? They're great, they can help, but it's all about what you do with those tools. So it really is all about you. I can tell you that in my career, I have done a lot of things. I've made a lot of mistakes. My road to here, I mean, you talk about a winding road. I've done all kinds of things, good and bad, to get here. But there were three things that really mattered, and it's what got me here in front of you today. So I'm going to talk about those three things. First and foremost, it's about communication. I'm smiling at somebody here because I've been talking to her about communication and a gift that she has for communication. If I were to point to one thing that helped me the most, it was the fact that I could communicate with people. I started out, now I say I was at Tuskegee, and this was, actually it was Tuskegee Institute. That's how long ago it was. It wasn't even Tuskegee University. I didn't graduate from Tuskegee. I left about 3 years into my engineering degree because I was really good at communicating. I was out, I had interned at NASA, at General Motors, and at Reliance Electric, and I talked my way into a job. And so I didn't actually finish college till much later. However, now you can't do that today. Okay, it doesn't work today. This was a long time ago. You have to finish as soon as you can. But I will tell you, the ability to communicate, I ended up getting a job in robotics. And this was 1980 that I got my first job in robotics. It was an upcoming field, and it led me to all kinds of things. I traveled the world. I was involved in the space program, in manufacturing. I was involved in nuclear cleanup. You name it, I was involved in all kinds of things. Mostly because I would just communicate to people. I would ask questions, okay? That was number one. Number two is initiative. So Senator Barrow asked people about what you were doing. I see that as a test. It's about initiative. You have to take the initiative to get in the middle of everything you can. So these tools that we're talking about, a big part of these tools are events that go on. It's opportunities to network. It's opportunities to be heard. You have to be heard. You have to get in the middle of everything you can, because there are people out there like us, and many more like us, that would love to help. We would love to connect you to other people that can help, and to other resources, you know, funding, mentorship, you name it, business opportunities. But it starts with you. You have to get out and get in the middle of everything. The initiative I'm talking about, and so the Nike slogan, "Just do it," it's profound. Just do it. Don't think about it. You know, at some point you have to stop planning. Just get out there and do it. You know, I often say that when you talk about inclusion and the whole inclusion thing, inclusion would be unnecessary if you're already there. We wouldn't have to be included. And that is so important for you to get. Get out there. Get involved. Don't be afraid to raise your hand and talk about what you want to do, because you could find somebody in the panel, in the audience, that can come up to you later and say, you know what, I've got just the person I want you to talk to, or I'm the person that I want you to talk to. So there was a young lady here that talked about wanting to be in construction, starting your construction company. See me later. There's an opportunity that's starting to bubble up, just starting. And I've talked to a couple of people here about a construction incubator that some people are starting to talk about. You're probably the perfect person to get involved with that. So see me afterwards. That's what I'm talking about. Last thing I'll mention is perseverance. Because the road to success is never a straight line. It never is. So you're going to run into a lot of disappointments. You'll run into people that are going to try and hold you back. You run into a lot of people that will deceive you. The fact is you have to dust yourself off and keep following your dream, whatever that is. I can tell you that if you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. If you look at entrepreneurs, if you study entrepreneurs who are now rich and famous and impactful and people follow, you look at their history. Every one of them have failed at some point and probably failed big, right? But it didn't stop them. They learned from those failures, they turned around, they did things better the next time, and eventually they succeeded big. So those three things, and I'll stop there, but those three things are the things that I wish I would have heard. I learned them over time, but I got a lot of bruises learning those things. So just remember, it's all about you. These tools are great, but it's what you do with the tools that really matter. Thank you.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to have to implement the 5-minute rule, so we'll have time for questions.
It won't be 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right. Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? My name is Raymond M. Fondell Jr. I'm from Lake Charles, Louisiana. Lake Charles. Oh, thank you. And I'm glad to be here with you today. And I can tell you this. I sat in the seat where y'all sat at. I graduated from here in 1989. I came here in 1987 from McNeese State University. I graduated in 1984, and I didn't do the right thing when I first went to college. And it's okay. It's okay. I didn't give up. I was determined to come to Southern University and to make it. Now, not a lot of my classmates came with me. It was just me. I came here and almost left the second day I was here, trying to get registered and everything. But I made it, though. And I know one thing about all of you that are in here. Your classmates are not with you. You come from all different schools, and there's something special about each one of you because you're doing something that your friends and your neighbors and your relatives, perhaps even your mom and your dad didn't do. You're here because you want something that's better, not only for you, but for your family. And that's why I believe all of you that are sitting in here that are working toward a degree, all of you have what's called greatness within you. And it doesn't come out until things come up in your life. Trials and tribulations, tough tests, if you've been through those things. But you find out when you work hard, you put the time into it, good things happen for you. And how many of you are freshmen in here for the first time? That's what I thought. So you've been through some trials and tribulations. And how many of your friends were with you when you started, but they're not here now? A lot. You don't have to raise your hands, I know it, because I went through it myself. I was one of the casualties at McNeese. I started off with a group of my classmates, and I didn't make it. But I regrouped, I got myself together, and I was determined to come to Southern University and make it. And I finished in 2.5 years. I graduated in 1989 with a business degree, with some of the finest teachers that you ever want to see. And I can tell you one thing about them, they love you. Because they could be somewhere else, teaching and making more money somewhere else, but they choose to be here because of you. So you owe them something. You owe them to give them the best that you can give them every day, give them your attention, because you're the future leaders of this country and of this world. It is you. You. I sit on the board of supervisors here at Southern University. Had no thought, any even inkling of being on this board, but I've promised myself one thing, that I'm gonna fight for all of y'all. Everybody that's sitting out here, I'm gonna leave something here so when my time is up, I'm gonna be like Kobe Bryant, I'm gonna be like LeBron James, I'm gonna leave it all on the court. I'm gonna give you everything I got. And when I step off, you're gonna know that I've done all that I can do. So with that being said, I know I'm approaching 3.5 minutes. I love questions. Questions are important because we wanna hear what you think. We wanna know the questions that you have. We've been through the trials and the tribulations out here. And all that we have here are tools and information to share with you. But at the core of everything, at the core of it, is you, and it's helping each other. So if somebody in this room is not making it or they're having a little trouble, you need to reach over and grab them and help them out. Because what you're going to find out at the end of the day, it helps you out so much more. And it prepares you for the story of life that you're going to face when you leave out these doors. So with that being said, I'm going to pass the mic on.
All right. Thank you for having me here. Y'all don't know how awesome the crew is that's in front of you and the resources that you have accessible to you today. I spoke at an event this morning, and I used the really nerdy sentence that I'm now regretting, but I said that human capital is the currency of economic development, and it's absolutely true, and it goes to what you just said. IBM moved here a few years ago, and what our organization does for economic development is to try to help grow the economy and to see new ventures expanding and new firms considering locating in the capital region. And they are not here because of incentives. They are not here because that beautiful building that they have downtown. They are here because we have two incredible universities in the capital region that they want to be in the market around. That is absolutely true. And so I say my first and most important thing that I want to make sure I say is when you graduate, and you will graduate, don't assume you should leave. I moved from Lake Charles to Illinois and then to California before returning, and I loved it, but you don't have to. And it's not often said enough that we want to make sure that there are opportunities for you, and we need you to stay when you finish and help us build the economy that we dream of for the capital region and for Louisiana. And so please, please, if you don't see the path to doing so, find a way to ask us how you might be able to stay and seek opportunities in the community. If you want to try to track me down, since Dr. Clayton sort of did the same thing, I'm on Twitter is probably the easiest way to do it. I'm a habitual tweeter about entrepreneurship and innovation issues. And so I'm at NAPPAD, KNAPPAD on Twitter. Send me a direct message if you have questions or things I can help with. I'd be happy to. The second thing I would say about the entrepreneurial ecosystem is that the change that came in the last few years is to realize that it is not about institutions and tools, as Dr. Clayton said. It's got to put the entrepreneurs in the center of that ecosystem. So when you see this drawing on the pages before you, entrepreneurs are at the center of this model, and everything that is there is meant to provide services and resources to help the entrepreneur to succeed. And that shift has been happening over the last few years in Louisiana and in the Baton Rouge area. The entrepreneurial ecosystem really, as Dr. Clayton said and others, it's about ideas and innovation. It's about the quality of the companies, the investability of the companies and the entrepreneurs, and it's about access to capital to support the possibility of that, capital being the oxygen that makes it possible for companies to breathe. And so those are the things that we try to make sure exist in the capital region's entrepreneurial ecosystem. And the last thought I wanted to share was about how to think about your companies as you are considering what you might be looking at creating. And to encourage you hear the word disruption and change. And really what I think of that as is to use change or use challenge as the opportunity to change the status quo and to look for new market opportunities. In Baton Rouge, there's a startup at the Florida Technology Park called Cell Control. Cell Control has recognized that distracted driving is a problem, that all our devices cause more accidents. And so they created a technology that blocks how you can make calls while you're in your car using Bluetooth technology. It's a really neat innovation. It was started here, and it's the market leader in their space in the United States and have partnerships with insurance companies to try to make driving safer. But their mission is actually to try to attack a problem in a different way. And I would say the same thing is true about the flood for a construction company, is that we have challenge and adversity. Use that to your advantage to create new ventures. And as the last thing, because I like to always read new books, the book, the recommendation I'll give you all today that I've been reading recently is called The New Geography of Jobs. And it talks a lot about how all these things are coming at play and how human capital is really transforming how communities are growing and changing across the United States. So with that, I'll end and take questions when we have an opportunity.
Hi, good morning. Can everybody hear me? Okay, good. I'm going to just say to you, I'm so glad to have this opportunity to be here. I'm a two-time graduate of Southern University, and met my wife here, and my sons graduated from Southern, and my granddaughter's in the lab school. While attending Southern University, we were taught by giants. They were the first people who were the first black women and first black men to do certain things.
So if you were taught by Dolores Spikes, who was the first black woman to get a PhD from Louisiana State University in mathematics, you're a giant. If you were taught by Jewel Prestage, the first black woman to get a PhD in political science, you were taught by giants. And I can go down the list of Henry Wiggins and other doctors, but I could also still look to other giants that are still here, like Donald Andrews, Dean Donald Andrews, Dr. Donald Andrews, still a giant, who taught me, who took a kid out of political science and still said, you're still going to be one of our students, as stubborn knucklehead as I was, but he still invested in me. He still spent time with me. And even to this day, he still spends time with me. I'm still growing to be a giant. All of you sitting in these chairs are giants. Do not think of yourself any less, because if you do, you might as well migrate to the land of the little people. You're students of Southern University. You're spread out all over the world. Southern University has people in every industry that you can think of. But you must now rethink where you are, who you are, and what you do. There will never be another generation of the first black this or the first black that. But you are the next generation of the first blank. You fill in that blank. You make the determination of what you will be the next first of. We don't know what that might be. One of you sitting in this room might create a formula that will cure sickle cell that my granddaughter has. One of you sitting in this room may be the one who finances the first rocket to Mars. One of you sitting in this room may be the person that comes up with the next great business model. But you must start with a basic understanding of your ecosystem and what it takes to get there. And please understand one thing. Education is only a passport, as Malcolm X said, to your future. You still have to take the steps to buy the ticket to get on the plane or the boat to get to the next destination or wherever that might be. You will have to determine that destination by your character, by your depth of education, and by your understanding of setting goals. In the game of football, football is a game of feet, inches, and yards. You have to set goals in order to get where you want to be. And if you refuse to set those goals, you will refuse to get where you need to be. And sometimes you'll get tired. One of the greatest coaches in football was Vince Lombardi. And Vince Lombardi said, fatigue makes cowards of us all. When I was a student at Southern University, I took every class that I could get my hands on. And let me say to you this day, I have used every single class that I've taken. I've taken chemistry. Well, guess what? I'm buying some property right next to the Palisades, okay? They have to do some chemical tests called a phase 1 and a phase 2 on that property. I have to talk with chemists, engineers. So I have to understand what they're saying to me. So every class that you take here at Southern University, you will use each and every class. I use Dr. Andrews' economics class. I use Professor Spain's class. I've used the marketing class, accounting classes. One of the things that Mr. Matthews talked about is accounting, finance. Without the money, all you have is a dream. But while you're students here, understand that you will need every single tool that's put before you. Dr. Clayton talked about technology. Technology is the great equalizer. I can remember when there weren't personal computers. They were just computers. But understand one thing. If you took the human brain and it was a computer, the human brain would fill this entire room and then some. Think how wonderfully you're made. Think of the things that you can create. Think of the places that you can go if you challenge yourself. Right now, you need to challenge yourself to be better than you are. In North Baton Rouge, we're now focusing on the things that can make North Baton Rouge a better place. Question for everybody. How many people have been to the Blue Store? Hands? Okay, everybody's been to the Blue Store? The Blue Store is now expanded, right? Doubling its capacity. Why didn't we create a Blue Store? Oops, didn't mean to step on toes, sorry. Just telling you something you're familiar with. There is money in North Baton Rouge. There is money throughout Baton Rouge. Let me give you a simple story. Education is very, very important, but it's kind of a funny joke, okay? So it goes something, well, it may not be funny, but it goes something like this. So there was a guy, brain surgeon, he calls a plumber. Plumber comes to his house on the weekend, does a plumbing job, and he hands him the bill. And he says, my God, I don't make this much as a brain surgeon. So the plumber says, neither did I when I was a brain surgeon. The point I'm trying to get across to you is simply this. In every strata of job creation, and you will create jobs, you can still make money. Because no matter how many robots we create, no matter how many positions we create, somebody still has to fix things. Somebody's still going to have to fix the plumbing. Somebody's still going to have to fix and install the electronics. Somebody's still going to have to fix the cars that we may drive or may not be driving at that time. Somebody's still going to have to fix the computers. But also, somebody's going to have to own the companies that hire the people, that fix the computers, that account for the payroll, that accounts for the marketing, that accounts for the online presence, that accounts for the social media, that will drive the process of the technology that made the car. You get what I'm saying? You're giants. You're Southernites. Dream big. Act big. Because you were taught by giants, not by little people. Thank you.
Opening up now for questions about the entrepreneurial ecosystem.
Hello, everybody.
Morning.
Are you ready? Okay, my question is, how do you feel about Donald Trump's presidency, solely based on his personal business and economic advances? Do you think this will negatively affect small businesses, minority entrepreneurs, and impoverished portions of America?
Who wants to take that one?
I'll take it. I don't agree with a lot of his views or any of those things, but I think what he's done is he's used marketing. And that's what he's known for. He's marketed himself. He speaks loud, he says a lot of things, and things we probably don't agree with, but it's boisterous. And he's found a way to connect with people that none of us probably in this room could have ever anticipated. And I say that the marketing part of it was the big thing. Now, I would hope that the Lord would guide him in a way that he would look out for all of us and understand that there are certain people in this community who need help. While we are here right now, there's somebody in a nursing home somewhere, your age, that has to be taken care of. They have to be fed. They have to be clean. They have to be bathed. All of those things. So we as a society and as a community, we have to look out for each other. Now, he's sitting in one position. He's only one man. We have to make sure that if he's not doing what we need him to do, that when the next time elections come up, that we get involved. And we not just worry about ourselves going to the polls. We grab somebody else's hand and say, look, we have to go. And that's what happened around this country. People heard what he was saying, he touched the nerve, and they started grabbing friends and neighbors and saying, you know what, we gotta go. We gotta go vote. And, they were successful in doing that.
I would just add real quickly to that certainly he has given, I believe that he's offered hope, because many individuals did not even think this gentleman had an opportunity of winning. And so in your business, I hope that you see that whatever it is that you want to do, that you can achieve, because that's one of the things that he did. I mean, when he started off, no one really believed that he had a snowball chance to make it there, but he did. But as it relates to the business aspect, I believe that if you have a wealthy business, I believe that you will see great benefits through many of the policy initiatives that he planned to implement. However, for small entrepreneurs, that would remain to be seen. But I have a friend of mine who shared with me that they were excited about one of the initiatives that they think he's getting ready to try to push down the pipe, because they are very wealthy, and this will provide a great break for them. So it depends on where you stand on the business spectrum that may be more beneficial for you. But all that remains to be seen.
And I'll add, too, I think the politics of separation and isolation are not necessarily healthy historically for America, and you've seen that the trend has bent in the opposite direction historically. I think that he will have a difficult time pushing an isolationist agenda, and I think that's going to be a big question that we're going to watch. But I will say this, it largely doesn't matter to how we decide about our entrepreneurial communities around the country, what happens at the national level. I think we think of entrepreneurial ecosystems very much at a regional level and state level, and the economies of this country are very diversified. And I think the opportunities within Louisiana are very much a part of the economy that is here today in front of us, and that really, while we can, my wife is habitually on Facebook and yells at me every night about how angry she is and stuff like that, but I think, I told her this morning, I was like, you're going to just burn yourself out reading Facebook and being angry. Let's focus on what's in front of us in our lives and in our family and our community, and we can do a lot more for ourselves and our entrepreneurial opportunities, my take.
So I'll add. I had to take a breath first. Good question, by the way. Really good question. I agree exactly with what people said here. I think you have to look at what you do with our new president. No one can predict exactly how this is going to work. It's very complicated because what he says he can do, he can't do. Okay, we all know that. But I keep track. I'm going to Washington, D.C. Next week, in fact, to hear some people talk about what they think is going to happen. The fact is, no one really knows. But it's what you do with it. Again, it's about looking for opportunity and then taking advantage of that opportunity. One thing I will say is that our president's new policies, whatever they end up, some people will benefit. It's just how it works. Some people are going to benefit, some people aren't. Whether or not you benefit or not will largely depend on where you look for opportunity. The other thing I'll just say quickly is that what Donald Trump's politics have done, whether you agree, disagree, it doesn't matter, it is a wake-up call for all of us. I personally believe that a lot of us, and I say us because I'm one, we're starting to get very comfortable in the way things are, in the status quo. What this whole campaign and everything it means, it woke us all up to, no matter how you look at it, it is telling us that the world is changing and that we need to take a really close look and decide how we want this story to end, or how we want this, what direction we want the story to take, and get involved. If we don't get involved, then things happen that we don't like. So we have to get involved. So for that, I think what's happened in his election, and I think history will show that it really is going to do a favor for all of us.
Okay, next question, okay.
I wanted to touch on some things that you spoke about earlier about HBCUs being the economic drivers. Especially here in North Baton Rouge, we know that we have a major problem with economic development. I asked, how can we do that as a university when, one, food services are provided by non-Black companies, when we have an agricultural center here, and two, major repair and construction projects are given to non-Black firms. And this is happening on an HBCU campus. So when we talk about entrepreneurship, we also see that these same businesses are not based in North Baton Rouge, don't hire Southern students, and then we wonder why North Baton Rouge talent wants to leave. So how are we going to spur economic development when we have these kind of problems on an HBCU campus?
Well, I'll start off by, in fact, to a certain extent, I mean, you have to understand, one of the things that John Matthews talked about is capacity. So in terms of North Baton Rouge, you have to look at things in terms of total mass. Our economic district is 25 miles in size. We have businesses that go from all kinds of different sizes, stratas, and so on. I can assure you that Southern University does business with a lot of minority firms, a lot of them. So what has to happen is we have to build capacity. Right now, Dr. Clayton, Dr. Andrews, and I are working with other alumni groups to help bring business not only to North Baton Rouge, but also to the university in terms of capacity, okay, in terms of bringing new technology, construction companies, and things of this nature. It's a long game. It's a long-term thing that's going to happen. The university does its best, but the university is sometimes strapped by rules from the state on capacity. For example, there's a $50,000 rule in city parish government as well as Senator Barrow, I'm sure, can speak to this a little bit better, but there are certain caps and limits that government or public agencies have that they can give out contracts for, okay? And if you can't meet that or compete at that contract level, then you can't get that business. So what businesses have to do now is to build their capital capacity, their bonding capacity, and also their staffing capacity as well. So these are things that take an ecosystem that, you know, will help you build those kind of things. And we just have to know one thing. For example, if we were trying to bring a Chili's to North Baton Rouge, as an example, by the airport is the most incentivized piece of property in Baton Rouge. You have no property tax. You have all kinds of incentives. It's an enterprise zone. It's a hub zone. It has all kinds of incentives. To bring a Chili's here, an entrepreneur would have to have a minimum of $5 million for that particular franchise. Now, one could create their own franchise and possibly do it as others have done. So it takes a lot of money. And we think of things like the Chili's are just par for the course. But the capital infusion it takes to start a business nowadays is very, very expensive, even for restaurant chains or whatever. So even to start a convenience store, I asked a question. I was on another panel for the mayor president, and I asked some of my fellow panel members, how much do you think it costs to open a dollar store? Question, pop quiz time. How much? Anybody can tell me, how much do you think it costs to open a dollar store? How much? This lady is correct, a little bit high. The average dollar store, which there are dollar store galore in North Baton Rouge, costs on an average, when you purchase the land, put up the building, and do everything else, costs nearly $2 million. So if somebody came to your community and said, hey, I'd like to put in about 12 units starting at $2 million a piece, you say, hey, that's great. But when you say it's a dollar store, people may have an issue with it. Now, everybody goes to the dollar store. True? So these are investments that are happening. So to answer your question directly, hopefully I have given you a raw point. There are investments that are happening in North Baton Rouge. So don't fool yourself. Another case in point, I'm just making it very, very brief and I'm finished. The Alumni Federation is getting ready to build an alumni center. As soon as we change the zoning for that particular center, the Alumni Federation start getting all kinds of phone calls about buying the property. Make no mistake about what you have in North Baton Rouge. You have a lot of opportunities here in North Baton Rouge. You just have to take advantage of those opportunities.
I'd like to speak about us dealing with minority businesses here. We do have the president that's sitting here with President Belton. We've had conversations with regards to that. One of the biggest challenges we find is information and making sure that we know what is available out there, making sure that we're in positions of being DBEs and SBEs is important. All we have to do is just access it. There is opportunities within the university for minority opportunities, but we have to apply for them. And we have to, again, be able to have the capacity to do it also. So opportunities are there for all of you that are in here. Beyond this day-to-day, if you go beyond here, you graduate, you want to establish a business, make sure not only at this university, but at all universities, there are opportunities that are there for you. You have to inquire about them, though. Thank you.
I know some of you have class, but those that are remaining, any other questions?
Good morning.
Morning.
My question this morning is, as an entrepreneur, what is the biggest obstacle you face making a small business successful?
Again, lack of information. You know, we used to think that it was lack of access to capital. We used to think it was other things, but unfortunately, if you don't have the information in terms of, again, I'll go back to the playing field, if you don't have the information in terms of who you're competing against, of where the opportunities are, if you don't have information with regard to a business model, something as simple as maybe you're dealing with an antiquated model. So I think that it's incumbent upon many of our folks that are in the women and minority space that we gather and that we do due diligence with regard to information. I also think that, you know, when we look at the state of Louisiana, It's important for us to understand that there are many, many opportunities here with regard to not just bricks and mortar. We have a number of construction-related projects in our energy sector. We're going to have a wealth of opportunities in coastal restoration, water management projects. We have many, many opportunities with regard to access to opportunities. But many of our entrepreneurs are not aware of that. So Governor Edwards has asked us to develop a portal, a way of matchmaking, a way of making sure and ensure that women and minorities have access to these opportunities in the greater Lake Charles area, in other parts of the state. But with that comes something else. You know, the gentleman prior to this mentioned, you know, well, why aren't more minorities getting opportunities and whatnot? And it's something interesting that we found. We find that, for instance, if you don't have a safety certification, you can't access some of these petrochemical plants. Many of our folks are just not ready. Many of our folk want to get to the head of the line when they are not willing to go through the process to get them to a point where they can compete. This is not a issue of, in most cases that I see, because I'm gonna tell you, when you hear this word goals and DBE goals and whatnot, what do we often hear at the state level? I'm gonna tell you what we hear. We can't find them. That's why we couldn't fulfill our obligation. We couldn't find them. Well, they're there. They're there, so we're trying to match that and make sure that we do that, but we also want to lean on HBCUs and Southern University and others to help us make sure that we get folks ready. You can't bid on a project if you have no understanding of estimating. They're not just going to give you that. So that's a problem. So we have to make sure that our contractors are estimating. And we also need to make sure that, for instance, next month, the State of Louisiana and Louisiana Contractors Accreditation Institute will be able to do a 6-week course to help folks pass the business and law component of the state licensing. So without a state license, you can't even get to play. So we're trying to do things to get folks in the pipe so that we could reap the harvest. First, you have to plant the seeds in order to reap your harvest. And we're wanting to do that. So I think that, and Adam Knapp mentioned that the tide is changing, the environment is changing, and what we have to do and is make sure that we have the skill sets and the capacity to be able to take advantage of those things.
So I'm going to mention a couple of things here, and I'm going to co-sign what John said about just understanding what's out there. So when I first got here, I've been here in Baton Rouge for a couple of years. When I first got here, I talked to a lot of people about, okay, so tell me about, you know, being an entrepreneur here, what do you need? And I heard over and over and over again, I don't know where to plug in. I don't know, you know, what kind of resources are out there. There's not enough out here. It's exactly what you're talking about. So we started on a project which we ended up partnering with Southern and also partnering with the Economic Development Administration on developing a portal. Well, in that process of developing the portal, I found out there's all kinds of things here. They're everywhere. We are at, if you go to www.nexus-la.org, you'll see the portal. I think we're at 400 and some odd different organizations and resources out there for entrepreneurs. They're everywhere, okay? So they're out there. The thing is to get out there and access those kind of tools so you can get the kind of help you need. Becoming an entrepreneur, being a successful entrepreneur, you need help from everywhere. And so the question is getting out there. So, and that website, by the way, the portal is getting ready to undergo a new change, which is it's going to be set up in the next few months where people can go out, entrepreneurs can go out, answer a few questions, And it's going to say, here's where you are in the entrepreneurship process, and here's what we think are next steps. And then here, based on where you are, here are resources in your region that you should go talk to take those next steps, right? So those are the kind of tools that are out there. You just have to get to them. The other thing I'm going to mention quickly in that same vein of understanding what's out there and addressing your question, the other thing is capital, right? Cash, you need money. Money comes in all shapes and sizes and, debt and equity and friends and family and all that. But as a student, be aware of all the competitions that are out there that you can get legal advice, different services, capital, grants, whatever, to help you get started. We have something that we partnered with Southern on. It's called the BizTech Challenge. We held it at the Bayou Classic. Last year was our first one. We ended up getting all 6 campuses, HBCU campuses from around the state to participate. There were $38,000 total worth of cash and prizes given away. The winner got a $10,000 check, and we trotted them out with a big jumbo check, right before the Bayou Classic football game. So, and that's just here. There's all kinds of things out there. Just got to look for them, get involved, and you'll be surprised at the resources and help and mentorship that you can find.
Piggyback on what he's saying, at one time they would tell you to have 3 to 6 months worth of expenses saved. Nowadays, you really need to have approximately 6 to 12 months. So I'd say one of the first things is to have those monies set aside, knowing, okay, well, if I'm spending this on marketing and advertising, how much is left over for my other expenses, whether that's staffing or so on and so forth. So that's, one thing I just want to add to what he's saying is to definitely have those revenues in your bank account early on. I just wanted to make that comment.
No, I'll just say one more thing. Cash flow is what kills most companies. I know 3 people who have made lots of money going out, finding entrepreneurs who have great ideas, who've run out of cash, and buying those businesses for cheap, and then making those businesses successful. So cash flow is extremely important.
Hi, my name is Alexis Flowers, and when Senator Barrow asked if anyone wanted to open a business, that's not particularly me. I'm an accounting major, and I would actually like to advise a friend. I have a friend that would like to open an art appreciation lounge because, like you said, your daughter said, there's nothing to do in Baton Rouge. And I see this as an opportunity to go ahead and open a lounge for, younger people to go and hang out and, a safe space for our young people. From a generational and technological standpoint, how do you all suggest appealing to the generation as of now? Being that we would like to open a brick and mortar type thing instead of social media and things like that, how do you guys suggest that we appeal to this generation?
I have 2 sons that are millennials, and I think what their father and mother would want is not necessarily what they would want. I think the biggest mistake that we make as older, well, not older, but yeah, just talking about John.
Yeah, older.
The mistake that we make is that we don't talk to you. We don't sit down and ask you, what is it you want? What is it you like? What is it you think will make you successful? We just kind of come down from the mountain with the 2 tablets and say, here, this is what thou must do. Well, maybe not. Maybe we should ask you what you like. Maybe we should ask you what is it you want to do. And maybe those are the kind of things, as Adam is talking about, will make people want to stay. We just got to ask you. But we don't. We tell you. And that's where the problem comes in. From a technological standpoint, you guys are light years ahead of where we were when we were your age. But it really still gets back to personal relationships, perseverance, and just the simple thing of being courteous and asking human beings simple questions like, hey, what do you think will make Baton Rouge a great place to live and to work and to play? Not a hard question. Maybe the answer's complex, but we gotta just ask.
Well, I want to commend you for standing up and speaking because certainly we do need good accountants. And so I want to applaud you for that, going into that field. And I want to let everybody know that my daughter is still here. She's actually working with the elderly and doing a great job, and has aspirations now to start her own business. So she's here in Baton Rouge. She's still in North Baton Rouge, and it's making a difference. But I definitely echo what Rinaldi said as it relates to listening to the younger generation. I have to say that oftentimes we operate in a sphere of safety. And so I encourage young people to jump off the springboard, to do those things that really burns deeply in your heart that oftentimes we may not be able to see. And that's part of sometimes the fear that the older generation have. But listening to you guys and engaging you more, I think is definitely the answer. As I have a millennial that works for me. My daughter's a millennial, and I have learned a lot in just watching and looking, because you guys are able to navigate and do multiple things all at the same time. While, myself, I like kind of be playing it safe, but we have to really be more willing to listen to you guys, and you guys tell us what it is that you would like to see and begin to do it. Don't be afraid. Jump off the springboard.
And Dr. Andrews, I just want to say this. I think communication is important dealing with the younger generation, but I think we have to create an environment to where they are helping each other and learning how to help each other. We have a lot of individuals who are 17, 18, 19 years old that are being away from home for the first time. And sometimes they don't know what's expected of them. Most times they'll go to college and they say, just go to college, get your work done, and graduate. But we're preparing them. Basically, they're in an ecosystem here at the university. It goes from each classroom to their dorms, to their apartments if they live there. They're creating their own ecosystem. So I would like to see an environment here at our university where we are really reaching out and helping each other. When I came here, they told me to look on my left and look on my right. And one of the three of y'all is not going to graduate, and that's the way it is. My philosophy has always been to be able to help each other. If he's not making it, he's not making it, we're not making it. And those of you who've pledged before understand that mentality. We speak with one voice. We all go together, we don't go at all. And that's the environment that we have to have here at our university, our own ecosystem right here. And that's what I say to my president that's here, to my provost, and to all the administration. We have to create an environment to where we are looking out for each other. And when these young men and women come to Southern, they come to Southern with the mentality that I'm going to graduate. Don't waste these teachers' times by coming here if your intention is just to come and have a good time and leave, because that hurts the entire society. It costs. It absolutely costs. If you're not going to come here and do what you need to do, move aside and let somebody else that wants to come here, give them an opportunity to come here and to succeed. Thank you.
I'm going to let Dean Uday respond to that, because we're both accredited by AACSB International. And one of the things in terms of our accreditation criteria is more student-faculty interaction. I think that's standard 12 or something of that nature. Uday.
Thank you, Dean Andrews. Good morning. One of the things that we try to do is to ensure that we encourage students through bringing experts from the community, those who have succeeded, those who have done the work before, entrepreneurs, to share their ideas with the students, to share their struggles, their successes, some of the things they've done differently, how they came up with the plan. And it's been very helpful doing that. And that's one of the things that our accreditation body encourages us to do. And we've been very successful at doing that at Southern University of New Orleans. Another thing we've been doing is to encourage students to experiment with their ideas. Because if you don't experiment with it, you will never know whether it can be done or not. It takes a lot of courage. As one of the panelists said, that intestinal fortitude to be able to step out there and take a risk. And we have been encouraging our students. Now, the body of students we have at SUNO is slightly different from what we have here. You have traditional students. There we have older students who have other kinds of issues, like they have children, they have full-time employees, so they can only go to school part-time. So it's even more difficult for them to step out in faith and take risk in terms of entrepreneurship. So the message we give them is slightly different. But when we have our panel discussion at 12:30, I intend to discuss a little bit more some of the things we've been doing to encourage risk-taking and entrepreneurship at SUNO.
You mentioned about taking risks. So several years ago, I was out in Silicon Valley having lunch with somebody, and could barely hear him talk because there was people behind us, a group of people, men and women, just laughing and having a great time and making all kind of noise. and you couldn't help but overhear what they were talking about. They were a group of entrepreneurs that were laughing about all the failures they had. And it was an aha moment for me, because at the time I was working in Ohio, and it was the difference between the Midwest and Silicon Valley. It was that they laughed at failure. These guys were proud of it. It was nothing. It was, yeah, I did this. What a stupid thing it was. I lost all this money, but they were all successful. So if I were to talk about one thing that I think the millennials and everybody else can really benefit from, it would be not to be afraid to take a risk, because you're not going to win big. We were talking about dreaming big. Dreaming big is worthless if you're not going to take the risks. So take the risk. You know you fail, so what? That's how you learn. That's how you get there to realize those big dreams. So, you know, take risks is what I would say is something that I would use to appeal to millennials.
Okay, we have one last question here.
How you doing? My name is Mohammed. I'm an accounting major, hopefully graduating this semester. I really want to thank you all for the great amount of information you provided to us today. It's really, helpful and educational a lot. I just want to say a part of my family is a part of small business owners in North Baton Rouge, and really wanted just a small little advice for, my dad. He's the head of it. He like you said, he's doing things the old school way. He's stuck on his old ways, and we're really trying to train him or, get him to do the newer things. If a small little advice would really be great for him.
It's a tough one.
Taking on a long vacation and no, I think one of the problems with family-owned businesses is that you need to sit down with your dad and say, Baba, we need a plan in order for us to continue. You built this business up, and we need to make sure that it continues into the next generation and the next generation. I think ease them into it that way, because every father wants, or mother, or parent, I should say, they want to make sure that the next generation has something. If I could give you a simple way to ease the old man into it, that's the way I would do it. And you would say to them and say, listen, we want to make sure this thing is around for generations to come. Let's start talking about what that means and how we need to change things so we can be ready. I think that's a way to probably ease them into it, because we run into a lot of small business owners who are first generation, and the kids get the business in the last couple of years and it's dead. So that's something that you need. And you need to have a succession plan, because life will happen, and the assets can get lost. So that's one of the ways to do it.
And I also would suggest that that you guys visit your Small Business Development Center here at Southern University. I think that through Southern's Small Business Development Center, there are a number of resources at the state level that will address this deal about being able to change your business model, understand that you're not really working on your business, you're just working in your business. And that is the part that folks need to come to grips with, is that you need to be working on the business and not necessarily always in the business. So my suggestion would be to set up an appointment with the counselors at Southern University Small Business Development Center, and then move forward with an action plan that would also include not just your father, but other members as you move, because family-owned businesses, this is not an unusual situation. It's very, very common.
The other one to talk, I think that the Southern Small Business Development Center is right on, and the other one, if you're looking for mentoring from existing business executives, there's a program called SCORE, and you can find it by Google searching SCORE Baton Rouge, and it'll direct you to somebody who'll give you free mentoring for that specific issue.
You can also invite him to come take a class here at Southern, okay?
And by the way, if I could just add, by the way, that's relevant. This idea of managing up, it's not just family businesses, it's corporations. you typically have to manage up. So that's actually relevant to everybody in this room, whether you're in a family business or you go to work for somebody else. There are times that you're going to have to break your supervisor, father, CEO, whoever, into doing things newer and better ways.
Okay, I want to thank Mr. Brian Herzog. You see him here, he's filming this entire session, so we're going to basically put this up on our YouTube page, and we also have all of this information we're going to put on our Twitter link as well. One last question, it's got to be short.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kevin Nelson. I would just like to ask the panel, do you see a value in having a federal liaison that assists with ecosystem planning and disaster recovery efforts at the university?
Yes.
Yes, that's absolutely.
Okay, so I think that question is affirmative. I think we need all the assistance we can to help put people back into business and back into their homes. We have a long road to go in terms of disaster recovery, but there are a lot of efforts being made. Okay, I think we're at the end of our session. This has been a wonderful panel. Let's give them a round of applause. I think this has been very educational, and I want to sign them up to come back again because we put on an EDA Economic Development Center that we have here, and we have put on a conference each June, the second week of June, I think it is, and so I want to invite them all back. I think they've done a fabulous effort here in terms of the information you got. And in terms of building this ecosystem, we have to put all the pieces together. And I think we can do better. We've been going to, and Adam's been taking people to Austin, to Nashville, to Charlotte, but at some point we got to get Baton Rouge up and running. And I think we can all do that working together. I'm a globalist. I don't see people in terms of different races, sex, religion, or whatever. We've all got to come together because we only have one planet here. And we all more or less can create jobs for each other. Trade is what economic development is all about. I grew up on a small farm. We had to almost produce everything we had to make. So we got able to earn income and trade. It made the world a lot bigger and a lot brighter and a lot more opportunity. We need to think more or less how we can work together. A lot of reasons people are excluded from networks because they're not a part of their network. We've got to break down the barriers and the silos and make life better for us all because this millennial generation, they may think a little bit different. They are wanting to be more connected. They have the internet and everything else. So we basically got to work to make sure we make Southern University a part of this ecosystem so that we can produce the talent that is needed here in the community to make Baton Rouge better. And I'll let my board member say the final comment here.
Well, what I was going to say is this. I was going to basically challenge you and challenge the business school that I graduated from here many years ago to create a system on each class. And it's a way of starting before they actually get out into, I say, the real world, by having those students that are in those classes that you have going on right now literally competing against each other by helping each other within each class, and see which class comes out at the end of the semester with the higher overall average. And with the help of the president, I'd love to have a reception for that particular class based on the challenge that we're giving here today. And it may make some folks uncomfortable. They may not see a meaning in it, but if we're talking about creating something within, let's start now. We don't have to wait until these young men and women go out into the real world and do it. Let's start it right now, where we're creating an environment where they're helping each other within our business school. Whoever comes out with the highest average, we'll work toward the end of the semester by having a reception for them over at the Wade House.
Right. We'll do that. We currently have what we call our Beta Gamma Sigma Honor Society.
Okay.
And we can expand on that. And that's the top 10% of students we have in the class in terms of their academic performance. Again, let's give our panel a round of applause. But I don't want you to go anywhere, because we have a gentleman here who's come all the way down from Cornell University. His name is Dr. Ralph Christie. He's been involved in our economic development program, and he basically is so adamant about supporting our programs that he's been working with the Rockefeller Foundation. He's been working with the Foundation for the Mid-South. And he's now putting together a program to build and help with this entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I'm going to ask Dr. Ralph Christie to come on down, and he can start more or less his presentation. Let's give him a round of applause. Dr. Ralph Christie. He is a Southern University graduate in economics, actually agricultural economics. Dr. Christie.
Thanks very much, Dean Andrews. It is a real pleasure being here at Southern. This is indeed home for me. And Dean Andrews talked about my frequent flyer miles and traveling, but it's nothing like coming home and understanding the context here. I had been commissioned by the Foundation of the Mid-South, which is a foundation in Jackson, Mississippi, that effectively give grants towards economic development for Louisiana, Arkansas, and the state of Louisiana to do a diagnostic prescriptive study on entrepreneurship, or the role of entrepreneurship in economic development. Now, it should not come to no surprise to people in this room that economic development and entrepreneurship is linked. After all, entrepreneurs are the engine of an economy. You create jobs, you create products, you expand markets, and you employ people. But it's interesting to discover, despite what we know in theory and in empirical evidence, that economic development oftentimes overlook local entrepreneurs in favor of attracting companies from outside the region. Some people have labeled this as smokestack chasing. And we know that companies come from the so-called north, they land in the south after huge incentives, and then they in turn end up in Mexico when the incentives gets better. And so now people are realizing that a more creative and perhaps more sustainable way is to create your own entrepreneurs. With that said, the Foundation of the Mid-South was very interested in this as a programmatic area, and they commissioned us to do 3 very specific things. I'm going to report on one of our activities, which is most recently occurring this past week, as Dean Andrews mentioned. First, they wanted us to take a deep dive in the secondary data. This is public data on small business development or business development in the 3 states. I can quickly report to you, if you look at Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi, Louisiana has more business development than the neighboring states. This is no surprise. New Orleans is a big attraction and perhaps a big driver of that development. After looking at the secondary data, secondly, they wanted us to do what we call need assessments, or ground truthing. In other words, just don't look at the data. Let's come on the ground, talk to people across the 3 states, entrepreneurs, universities, NGOs, public officials, both at federal, state, and local levels, and get a ground truthing, if you will, of what the numbers are really telling us. What is really happening? What are the needs of men and women in this part of the world as it relates to entrepreneurship? Third, we wanted to do benchmark analysis. In other words, let's look at what is the best thinking in philanthropy as we look at other foundations and have ideas and gather ideas about what they are investing in. And so I have a team of 5 very talented graduate students at Cornell. They come from all over the world. 3 of the students spent the past 2 weeks here. They just returned to New York on Thursday or Friday of last week. And we have a phenomenal time of just talking to a whole range of people, including folks here at Southern. I was very proud to take my students to where I had attended school and visit with Dean Andrews and the chancellor of the law school. And I would say to you, I could not have been more proud as a Southern alum. That said, I want to be very quick and talk about 6 very tentative ideas that we are seeing. And I want to just lay them out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so you can have an understanding of what's emerging. This is a preliminary report. This is not the final report. But as we left at the airport in our final meeting last week, the students had 6 very tentative ideas that we're going to try to develop further. I had an opportunity to listen to the panel just very briefly and at the end of their presentation, and it becomes a no surprise as I talk about number 1, that access to capital is a real issue. Getting capital for a small business is a real issue. This is not only true here in Louisiana, but it's true across the world. But the problem here, as we see it, that there isn't sufficient number of patient capital opportunities. And by patient capital, I'm not talking about venture capital. I'm talking about that type of investment that would be patient, that would accept a longer period of time for payback and perhaps at a lower interest rates. And so trying to figure out how we create this type of additional creative funding in Louisiana, Mississippi, and Arkansas, I think it's a recommendation that we're tentatively coming forth. It doesn't have to be new creative institutions. This could be in the forms of guarantees in commercial banks. This could be a soft window that commercial banks would offer. There are a number of ways to do this, and I have had the good fortunes of developing patient capital institutions in Uganda and East Africa and Tanzania and Kenya, and I'm a firm believer that they work. It takes a strong leadership. It takes an inordinate amount of capital to get something started, but yet I do think it's a reasonable way to think about this access to capital problem. Commercial banks' interest rates are just too high. The underwriting capabilities, in all due respect to the commercial bankers in the audience, a lot of our small businesses just cannot sort of survive with the level of interest rates and terms. So we're going to have to get a bit more creative if we're ever going to do something about this access to capital issue. That's number 1. I said I had 6. Number 2, technical assistance. You know, lots of people want to be an entrepreneur. And over the last 2 weeks, we talked to entrepreneurs, we talked to technical assistant NGO providers, we talked to both federal, state, and local government officials. And we walk away from this saying that there's a real need, not so much for the students at the university who are getting accounting and finance and management and marketing. This is focusing on entrepreneurs that's in society. There is a real need for continuing technical assistance. And technical assistance could span from training to programs on writing your business plan, to helping people source capital. There's just even discovering if, in fact, whether or not you are an entrepreneur or not. A lot of people have ideas, they just remain ideas. They never get to the next step. And so we can see that there is a real need here for more technical assistance in this area. It does not, perhaps should not come to a surprise that a person in an academic institution will call for more training. But I want to be more specific here. I don't mean just classroom training. What we've discovered on the ground is that people who really want to go into business, and they talk to people who are at a university, or talk to people who are doing the training, what they quickly discovered that the people who are doing the training have never owned the business themselves. Okay? And so it is very difficult to talk in generic terms when real life entrepreneurs want solutions. And so then what we're talking not only about this technical generic training, writing a business plan or your mission statement and all of these kinds of things, we're talking about very sector-specific kinds of programs on contracting, for example. Louisiana, it is an amazing creative environment, but there's no way to capture all the creativity. You know, when I get ready to hear some good jazz, I have to go to New York City. And that's where all the guys in New Orleans are. Because recording opportunities and real opportunities here to create that business, to maintain that level of creativity, oftentimes doesn't exist. And so we need to start putting in place very sector specific around the art or cultural activities, around fashion and textile, around food, around a whole range of activities. I think some very domain specific technical assistance is absolutely needed. Number 3, we discovered that oftentimes entrepreneurs lack sufficient capital. And so Dean Uday there, I understand that he has an incubator in New Orleans, and we wanted to go by and visit. But we did see a lot of what we call clusters, this idea of clustering. The idea of bringing into one space, under one roof, under one location, a range of entrepreneurs. And in New Orleans and a little bit over in Jackson, and I think to some extent it exists here in Baton Rouge, these type of facilities are taking shape. Some of them are funded by the private sector, others are supported by the state, others supported by grants or the cities. But nonetheless, the idea of bringing under one roof, not for a short period of time, like an incubator, but for a sustained period of time where entrepreneurs could leave their products on consignment, or they could have kiosks or small locations within various shops. The idea of clustering makes sense. Now, the idea of a cluster works effectively if you're in an urban area. If there's high density foot traffic, clustering works well. One of the main areas in New Orleans, a historically depressed area, we used to call, any folks in New Orleans here would know this, Dryas Avenue, but now it's called Aretha Haley, Castle Haley. There's a whole new cluster over there around food. It's called the Rookery, where they have a new $1 million structure where they've brought in space for people who want to buy and sell food. All kinds of food, from Mexican to ethnic food to soul food, all different types of vendors can come in, and now it's a resource for the community. There are other clusters, the St. Roch Market on St. Claude Street. And so we find examples of clustering to be effective, again, in highly dense populations. The fourth, clusters perhaps will not be effective in rural areas. Just don't have the density of population. But we think it might be appropriate to think of rural areas in terms of networks, building strong networks. And by networks, connecting companies together electronically or through the internet. There are different parts of the country that have, for example, wine trails or art trails, where people can, or particularly tourists, can go from one particular business to the other. And so sort of advertising a region, a destination like the Delta, requires some creative thinking around network development, we think, in rural areas. Very tentative at this point, but we're trying to get more examples of this and work through the calculus of that recommendation. Recommendation number 5, land and property, or property rights. This is a huge impediment, as we know, to economic development. Too often communities, too often individual families are operating without proper titles of homes because of the grandfather and the great-grandfather and this heir property situation. You know, I'm reminded of a song that said, Mama just hung her head and said, Papa was a Rolling Stone. And too often we have this Rolling Stone in our African-American communities where our grandfathers and grandmothers and ancestors were great people, but they did not have a very good succession plan. They did not transfer property from one generation to the next very effectively. Not very good in having a will. I was talking to my brother the other day, and I asked him if he had a will, and he looked at me and he said, well, I don't plan on dying. And I said, oh, interesting, you know. So we don't have this, and so when something happens in the next generation, have to go through very costly and expensive procedures to get access to titles, to get access to property. As a result, you can't get a loan. As a result, you can't effectively develop communities. And so this whole space is something I know the Chancellor Pierre at the Law Center is very keenly interested in, but I do think we must begin to unlock property in ways that is contributive, contributive to the economic development process. So entrepreneurs and properties can be better developed. We spent a good part of the day in Algiers, we spent a good part of the day in Jackson, and we went to various communities that were trying to look at this question of economic development. And we discovered a lot of the land is locked in what you would call air property. And it's very difficult to get any development going forward. This property question also have a very interesting dimension to it, and it revolves around the question of gentrification. And let's be quite honest, in many of our African American communities, we see this in New Orleans, we see it in other places, we see it in Harlem, in New York. We see vast investments coming in, taking over communities where heretofore there were problems. Now this gentrification is occurring, and so now people who are in those communities can't afford to live there. You see it in Portland, Oregon, you see it all over the country. So then if economic development is going to have an impact and be inclusive, you have to allow possibilities for people to have ownership of their property. This is not just opening up the possibilities for deeds, but this is perhaps providing opportunities and innovative ideas, for example, like a land trust on certain buildings and certain iconic relationships in communities. And so that's an idea that we are certainly looking at. Ladies and gentlemen, let me just turn to the final sixth proposal that I think is coming shaped out of our work. And it is what we see going on here today. This is a lot to do with coordinating, collaborating, and connecting the dots between existing parties. I was blown back, quite frankly, by the number of non-government organizations, government activities, universities, entrepreneur programs, all over the 3 states. And this is not a case of the right hand not knowing what the left hand is doing. This is a case of the right hand not knowing that the left hand exists. This lack of coordination between entities, and I'm so happy to see the Delta Commission and the Allen Foundation. I have not had a chance to meet those good people yet, but this is something that's long needed. And this is just with Louisiana and Mississippi. This should go across the region, in fact. And there are a lot more universities, there are a lot more non-government organizations, there's a federal, state, and local government. All hands should be involved in this activity. And looking at this more holistically, understanding what various organizations have to offer, and how might potential partnerships be better forged. Connecting the dots and collaborating and networking, I think, is an important component that we're going to come very forceful with in the study that we are recommending. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, that is the sort of the thumbnail sketch of the work that we're doing. There may be other recommendations that will come forward. I'm saying the 6 that I'm giving this morning are tentative, but I do believe this gives you the architect or the structure of what we're trying to put forth here. What we're hoping is that philanthropic dollars will come and be able to support all of the ideas that we're proposing here. One of the most important things that we see in the landscape of any emerging economy is philanthropic dollars. They have a Gates Foundation, they have a Rockefeller Foundation, Kellogg, Ford. But when you look to the South, these types of institutions are missing. And for the good work at the foundation of the Mid-South, they're trying to bring this to the forefront to this part of the region, but more could be had. But I think having very specific ideas of about where the innovative programming could happen, what could have an effect, is what we're trying to put forth here with the 6 tentative ideas. I would simply say 6 modest ideas that we're having forth today. With that said, ladies and gentlemen, let me close. I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have. It's indeed a pleasure being here at Southern again. Dean?
Time for about 1 or 2 questions. Any questions? Dr. Uday.
How did you see that playing out in the New Orleans area in terms of spread or in terms of expertise? What is the clustering that you're seeing, and how do you think they can be connected?
Yes. So let me unpack that idea just a little bit further. Michael Porter, in his work, development economists who've done a lot of work in urban areas, have been a big proponent of clusters. And by clusters, we simply mean trying to get a number of businesses who may not have the capital, who may not have the marketing skills, who may not have the market access, to act together as under one operation. So with an incubator, you put a business in an incubator for a short period of time, and hopefully at some point they graduate out. The idea of a cluster is to not necessarily have them graduate out, but let them have a sustainable business model inside this collective action. So if you go to Dean Uday, to the St. Roch Market on St. Claude Street, I remember as a kid that being a very dilapidated building for a long time. You walk in there now, it is an oasis of food markets. If you go up on Magazine Street, and there are 2 or 3 of these cluster businesses that have come forward. We've met another lady who had something down on Canal in St. Charles. And so getting a large building, allowing other companies to come in to develop kiosks, charging them all very small rent, is what the private sector is doing. What we think is if we had more grant money, you could do more of these like you find over on the Rookery on Castle Haley Street. So we think that this idea is one that we can get more entrepreneurs built into. Not quite an incubator because they're going to graduate out one day into their own businesses. This is something of getting people to come into one location. All of us are familiar perhaps with the concept of Chinatown or Greek Town. Or you go to very specific places and you find a cluster of just restaurants or businesses in that one area. So this is just a strategy that we think that if we had some philanthropic funding, we can do more of this in low-income neighborhoods.
Hey, Dr. Christie, Eric Porter here. In particularly on gentrification. You mentioned Portland and Oakland, if you will, but specifically uptown New Orleans. Were your team able to see what's going on there?
Yes, we were actually staying in uptown New Orleans, and it is an amazing transformation that has occurred. New Orleans now, after Katrina, has more restaurants than before Katrina. The economic and entrepreneurial spirit from people coming from all over the country are pouring in, and if you can stop in any shop and ask a person, where are you from? And they will tell you, Oregon, Cleveland, Chicago, South Carolina. It's hard to find a person that's from New Orleans there. This is not a bad thing. This is a good thing. People are coming in and they're investing and they're cleaning up, they're taking risks, they're opening up all kinds of businesses. But we could not help but notice pushback from locals. And it's a real strong feeling among local communities that they're losing their communities, they're losing block by block, house by house. The property assessment gets higher, people now therefore are unable to pay the taxes, and next thing you know, they're almost forced to sell. So this is something that is happening. When you consider the fact of the air property problem that we have, when you consider the fact that there are certain iconic buildings that are in depressed communities or low-income communities that we simply don't have the capital to access. We're trying to figure out what are some creative ways to participate in this. I don't think there's anything wrong with transforming or improving a community. I think the result has to be sustainable and equitable. In other words, people in that community must have an opportunity to participate in the upside. And so if we can figure out ways to have that happen, we would think that would be good.
And one question here.
So,
Yes.
yeah, Dr. Christie, so you talked about patient capital.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit more about what's it, the debt, equity, are we talking royalties? What exactly is patient capital?
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. So this idea of patient capital is something that's been floating around for a while, and it takes on many forms. I can only give you an example of an experience that I've had with creating a patient capital institution. I had some funds from the Rockefeller family who wanted to do something in Africa. I got a call and said, okay, could you go to Uganda and create, along with several other investors, a patient capital institution. And what this institution still does, I got it started, was on the board for about 4 or 5 years, and then finally it was taking off and it didn't necessarily need me anymore. But the idea was to create an institution where if you were a small business, and we're not talking about micro, let me be clear here, this is not micro lending, because I don't think that micro lending would be a very effective model in the United States. I think people are too mobile. For the students in the audience, micro lending is something that's come from Professor Muhammad Yunus from Bangladesh. He won a Nobel Prize for this type of innovative financing. And we see that micro lending is something you can get $10,000 or $5,000 loan. We're talking $50,000 to $100,000 up. And if you are a business, for example, in a particular area, if you can demonstrate some social impacts, employment, you have a good product, you have a sustainable model, you have an impact on development, then you could approach this institution with a business plan, and the patient capital entity could provide a loan, could provide equity, and if they provided equity, they wanted a seat on your board of directors that will have you meet quarterly and give you the guidance and technical assistance and information, because they will put different people on the board of your company. Or, for example, if your company did not want a loan or did not want an equity, and equity was a big problem among small businesses, because they're family owned, and they don't want to give up, they don't see themselves giving up a piece of their business. That's just unquestionable to some people. And so some people would prefer loans, some people would take an equity, but the equity came with strings. And then finally, another window that I thought was innovative was that perhaps you don't want a loan and you don't want equity. We will then buy a capital equipment for your business and lease it to you. So then there's all possibilities here. A longer payback period at a lower interest rate, provided we could show the positive impacts on society. That was that magic window space. A bit experimental. I think it went well. We only started with about 7 million. The last I heard, they had 30 million, and they're even much larger than that now. So that's what I mean by patient capital. Something that's flexible, something that will look at all forms of needs that an entrepreneur might have. And we're talking 50,000 up.
Ralph, do you want to say anything about Market Matters right quick?
Oh, yes.
You've been telling you're going to bring me over, you know.
Yes, yes. For the last 17 years, I've had a real pleasure because I was a professor in a classroom, and I had never made a payroll. I never employed anyone, and I felt a little guilty about this. So about 17 years ago, I formed a nonprofit company that would look at markets. We saw the rise of markets, and we see it even in our in our very last election. There were winners and losers. And I wanted to do something about the people who were not necessarily taking full advantage of markets. So I created a nonprofit called Market Matters Incorporated. And we started in South Africa. And for the last 17 years, we've had what we call a high-level executive technical assistance program. It's a week-long program. We started with only 30 businesses. This coming May, we're expecting 80 to 100 businesses. For the last 10 years, we've had at least 100 businesses across the continent of Africa. 14, 15 countries. We know there are about 50 countries. We don't do French or we don't do Portuguese very well. Mostly the English-speaking African countries. And this is something that has really caught on fire. It is a flagship program we do near Cape Town every year. Again, 80 to 100 companies, from strategy to human resource management, the cash flow management for those of you who are accountants. How does this really work in a small business in an emerging economy? And so we've started that program, Making Markets Matter. And then 5, 6 years ago, we brought the same program to Asia. I'm headed out to Indonesia in a couple of weeks to do a similar program there. So this is something that's captured the imagination, and not unlike what I see going on the ground here. People are providing technical assistance. People are giving training. But the question is, how do we connect this to something bigger so entrepreneurs can walk out of there with something just more than training? They can actually walk out there with the network.
Okay, let's give Dr. Christie a round of applause. He's come down to our economic